Hello, good morning. This is the next literature lesson. Let's have a look. What is it today? Okay, so today is post-colonial literature. What's that? Let's have a look. So some questions first. I want you to talk to your partner. What do you think it is? What is post-colonial literature? And why is it interesting? Pause the video now to discuss those first two questions. Okay. Okay, so do you know all about post-colonial literature? Do you know why it's interesting? I think it's because it's so relevant to countries like yours, that was a colony, that has been a colony until recently. So we're going to look at what it is, why it's interesting, look at and analyze some examples, and read more. Okay? The first task is this one. So here is a definition of post-colonial literature. And there are 4 spaces. In those 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, you have to put the 4 words on the right, A, B, C, D. Okay, so pause the video. I think you need about 5 minutes for this. You can do it in pairs. Pause now. Okay, finished? Okay, so 1 is post-colonial literature, the discourse of 2, colonization. Number 3, issues of decolonization. And number 4, subjugated to colonial rule. Okay. And now we have the main concerns of post-colonial literature. There are 3 topics: reclaiming spaces and places, asserting cultural integrity, and revising history. On the right, we have 3 paragraphs. I want you to read them and match the paragraphs to number 1, 2, or 3. So you need to pause the screen and read and match and compare with your partner. Pause now. Okay. Have you got the answers? Okay, this is just a little trick to make you read it, not just saying read for no reason, but read and match, which gives you a reason for reading. So number 1, reclaiming spaces and places, is B, reclaiming after the colonizers had gone. Number 2, asserting cultural integrity, that is C, and it's the richness and validity of indigenous native cultures, and to restore this pride in your case, African practices and traditions. Number 3, revising history, that must be A, changing the history. Okay, and then the next slide is the characteristics of post-colonial literature. Again, we have 3 characteristics, 1, 2, 3, and we have 3 paragraphs, A, B, C, that you need to match. Okay, so pause the video and read and match and compare now. Okay. So they are talking about I think, Indian author, Arundhati Roy, who is a very famous post-colonial author. She writes brilliant books. I don't know if you know some of her books, using her just as an example there. So, number one, resistant descriptions. That is C. So it's resisting the stereotypes and generalizations that the colonizers created. Two, appropriation of the colonizers' language. That is A. Yes, because a lot of the colonized countries have so many languages, like India, for example, 12 languages, like Guinea-Bissau, of course. But they play with English and reappropriate it, take control of it. And then reworking colonial art forms, that is B. Okay, so that's lots of background information about post-colonial literature. Do you know any examples? I'm sure you do. What are the examples that you know of post-colonial literature? Okay, here are two of them. So I know you've been reading Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And we are going to read a bit of today, The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver is Canadian, and she is one of my favorite authors, a brilliant author. How do you think they are different, these two examples of post-colonial literature? Any ideas? You can pause and discuss if you want to. Okay, well, the main reason they're different is that Things Fall Apart is written by an African, by somebody who was colonized. And The Poisonwood Bible is written by an outsider, a Western person who was one of the colonizers. So post-colonial literature has been written from both sides, and we're going to look at The Poisonwood Bible to contrast with Things Fall Apart. First, though, let's just briefly discuss Things Fall Apart. Did colonialism make everything fall apart in Africa, and how? Okay, so this book, it describes what happens to a strong Nigerian tribe, an insight into African culture, tragic and moving story of an individual set in the wider context of the coming of colonialism, as well as a powerful and complex political statement. That's a summary, very, very brief summary of Things Fall Apart. And there are some more links to analysis on those links there. Like last week, I showed you lots of online essays and analysis of literature. This is New York essays and Ask Literature. They have a lot of information about post-colonial views on Things Fall Apart. Have a look at those links if you're interested. Here's a nice visual with the main themes of Things Fall Apart. I want you to look at this visual, pause the video, and discuss with your partner what you know about all those themes in Things Fall Apart. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, I'm sure you know far more than me about Things Fall Apart from all your study. And that is, of course, a very famous post-colonial book. Now, I'm going to read aloud this summary from the second post-colonial book we're going to look at. It's called The Poisonwood Bible, and it's by this Canadian woman, Barbara Kingsolver. It's a modern book. I want you to listen and read at the same time and follow and see how much you understand how you can get tips on how to read aloud well, and if there are any problems with reading aloud. Okay, so sit back, relax. If you can't see the screen properly, move closer to the screen so that you can see it. If you need more time on any of the screens, you can, of course, pause the video. Are you ready? Now, this is 6 slides. So count 6 slides. I'm going to be reading it all to you. Okay, read and listen at the same time. Ready? The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. In 1959, an overzealous Baptist minister named Nathan Price drags his wife and 4 daughters deep into the heart of the Congo on a mission to save the unenlightened souls of Africa. The 5 women narrate the novel. From the outset, the attitudes of the 5 women cover a wide spectrum. The mother, Oliana, passively accepts the turn of events as she passively accepts everything her husband tells her. 15-year-old beauty queen Rachel resents her separation from normal teen life. 5-year-old adventurer Ruth May is both excited and frightened. 14-year-old Leah, who alone shares her father's ardent religious faith, is enthusiastic. Leah's twin Ada, a cripple and mute by birth, but also a brilliant observer, merely views the move, as she does all of life, with a wry and cynical detachment. One thing that the women share, however, is the unwavering faith that they are carrying with them a culture far superior to the one already existing in the village of Kilanga, and that they will therefore instantly be masters of their new domain. It does not take long for this faith to begin to waver. The first sign that they have miscalculated the superiority of their way of life comes when Nathan attempts to plant a vegetable garden. His demonstration garden is intended to both provide food for his family and to instruct the natives in simple agricultural principles that might save them from malnutrition. However, though his garden grows lush and huge, none of his plants ever bear fruit. It takes him several weeks to realize that his plants cannot bear fruit here because there are no African pollinators suited to North American vegetables. The next and much larger blow comes when their live-in helper, Mama Tataba, becomes so enraged at Nathan's insistence on baptism for the villagers that she deserts them. As Mama Tataba explains in her final burst of anger, the villagers will never agree to being dunked in the river because a crocodile recently ate a young girl in that very river. Though the women are shaken by these events and slowly affected by the culture around them, Nathan remains steadfast in his original goals. He refuses to give up the attempt to baptize the villagers or to bend his will in any way. When the only English-speaking member of the village, the handsome young school teacher Anatole, informs Nathan that the chief, Tata Ndu, looks askance at his proselytizing and fears that a move towards Christianity will spell the moral decline of his people, Nathan becomes outraged and throws Anatole out of his house, rather than trying to gather more insight from him into the traditional religious life of the village. Even when their situation becomes mortally dangerous, Nathan clings tenaciously to his mission. Though little progress is being made in Kilanga, tremendous shifts are taking place elsewhere in the Congo. As the Underdowns, the Price's contacts to the Mission League, inform them on a surprise visit, Belgium is about to give the country its independence. A popular election will be held to select the new ruler. The Underdowns warn the Prices that they must evacuate the country, as purges of all Westerners are expected to take place once independence is won. Though his wife and daughters plead with him to heed this suggestion, Nathan refuses. The day that the evacuation plane arrives and Nathan forbids his family to board, Orleana crawls into bed and finds herself unable or unwilling to get up. For several weeks, Orleana lies in bed, and the three older girls must find a way to feed and care for the family themselves. When Orleana finally pulls herself together, she is a changed woman. She speaks her mind to Nathan instead of cowering before him, and she begins to search desperately for a way to get her daughters out of Africa. She attempts to bribe the mercenary pilot Ibn Axelroot to fly them home, but he refuses to work without cash up front. In the meantime, Leah is slowly falling in love with the school teacher, Anatole, and falling out of love with her father and his simplistic view of right and wrong, while Ada is falling in love with the subtle language of Lingala. Rachel must pretend to be engaged to Ibn Axelroot to avoid a pity proposal of marriage from Chief Ndu, and she too finds her way into slight and self-serving infatuation. Ruth May falls ill with malaria, and when she recovers, she is a pale, shadowy version of her old self. A dry spell hits Kalenga, and the people begin to starve. They organize a tremendous hunt, and controversy breaks out over whether Leah, who has become an excellent marksman under her friend Nelson's direction, can partake. The issue is put to a vote, which goes in favor of Leah's participation. Chief Ndu and the village's religious leader, Tata Kuvundu, are outraged by the idea of a woman participating in the hunt. Tata Kuvundu ominously warns that because they have overturned the natural world order, the animals will turn on them. The next evening, Anatole finds an evil sign outside of his hut and awakes the following morning to find a poisonous mamba snake curled up beside his bed. After the hunt, Nelson finds an evil sign outside of his home, which happens to be the Price's chicken coop, and begs to spend the night in their house. Nathan refuses his request, but the girls take pity on his whimpering and join him outside. Taking a cue from one of their father's sermons, they spread the ground with ash, hoping to catch the footprints of the person planting poisonous snakes in the homes of those connected to the Prices. The next morning, when they sneak out to the chicken coop, they see the 6-toed footprints of Tata Kuvunda, as well as a green mamba snake lying in the corner. Nelson pokes the snake with a pole and it slithers out the door and past them. However, on its way out, it bites Ruth May on the shoulder and she dies before their eyes. In the wake of Ruth May's death, Orleana silently leads her daughters out of Kilanga. They walk along the road in torrential rains as far as Bulungu, but then Leah falls too ill with malaria to continue on. From Bulungu, Rachel is flown to Johannesburg, South Africa, by Ibn Axelroot. Ada and Orleana make their way to the Belgian embassy in Leopoldville and then on to Georgia. And as Leah convalesces under Anatole's care, She falls wholly in love and decides to remain in the Congo as his wife. Rachel goes on to marry 3 men, the last of whom leaves her a luxury hotel deep in the French Congo, which she spends the rest of her life happily running. Ada goes to medical school and becomes a successful epidemiologist, taking on science as her religion. Lee and Anatole have 4 sons and spend their lives working towards true independence and justice for African nations. Orleana finally lives her life racked with guilt and begging for forgiveness from Ruth May. In the last section of the book, narrated by the dead Ruth May, this forgiveness is granted. Okay, so that was the story. Did you enjoy having it read to you? Did you notice lots of ways of reading aloud and stressing the important words, for example? And have a look here. There are lots of, for example, line 2 on this page, relative clauses. Did you hear how I read them? I'm just going to read that sentence again at the top of this page. They organize a tremendous hunt and controversy breaks out over whether Leah, who has become an excellent marksman under her friend Nelson's direction, can partake. So the intonation is a lot lower in the relative clause, who has become an excellent marksman. Then we've got a sentence after that with another relative clause. The issue is put to a vote, which goes in favour of Leah's participation. So again, commas with pauses, down goes the intonation. Okay, did you like the story? It's not a happy story. It's a very, very sad story. And it's from the point of view and all about the colonizers. It's all about Belgium, the Americans, the Western people, bringing their religions, bringing their ideas onto and trying to impose them on a village in Congo. Okay, let's have a look now at some essay questions. Now, I'm not going to ask you to write an essay about it, but it's interesting to read the essays that people write to get another view of different points in the story. So this is interesting. This essay question is, of all the Prices, the family, only Nathan does not get the opportunity to tell us his side of the story. Why do you think that is? I'm going to leave you now to read that to yourself to find out why. So pause now, read this and tell your partner why Nathan doesn't get the opportunity to tell his story. Okay. And this is about the symbolism, because Nathan is representative of Western arrogance and blindness. Okay, he is all these misguided colonists, missionaries, government who try to impose what they think is better on the colonies. Very interesting, the people who represent the different parts. Okay, we have another one here, and this is interesting. This essay question, why do you think the book is called The Poisonwood Bible? What are the implications of the title for the book's main themes? And I'm going to read this out to you so you can see if you prefer reading silently or listening to someone read aloud. In the Congolese language of Lingala, the word Bangala has 2 meanings. If spoken slowly, the word means dearly beloved. If spoken quickly, it refers to the poisonwood tree, a local plant that can cause painfully swelling if it is touched, and death if its wood is burned and the smoke inhaled. Reverend Price, in his willful ignorance of the culture around him, never catches on to this distinction. And so he preaches week after week that Jesus is a poisonous plant. Nathan's mistake is a symptom of his larger cultural arrogance. And so the title, The Poisonwood Bible, calls attention to this arrogance. Nathan's mistake is also significant for its content. Calling Jesus a poisonous plant is telling in itself. In the hands of men like Nathan, men with his level of cultural hubris and his blindness to a culture that surrounds him daily, Jesus can become a dangerous force, a force as poisonous as the local tree. Wielded clumsily by Nathan, Jesus indirectly ends up killing Ruth May and brutally wounding the rest of the Price women. Interesting to see where the title came from. And it's this play on words, different meanings in a local language, Lingala, and of the tree. And it represents the religion being imposed on people as well. Interesting. Okay, so I've just been reading aloud to you, and I don't know if you enjoyed it or not, but I want to talk about now the secrets to reading aloud. So how can you read aloud better? And when do teachers and parents need to read aloud? I want you to pause now to discuss this for 5 minutes with your partner. 3 questions, secrets, how can you read aloud better, and when? Pause for 5 minutes. Okay, so we're going to answer those questions together, see if you agree with my points. So people need to read aloud in these contexts. So traditional teaching context, like religious settings, newsreaders, number 2, reports about work, that could be university study or some sort of reporting in an office. Parents and siblings read books to younger children. We do that a lot in the UK for hours every day, if we can, when children are little, when they are 2 or 3 months old, until they read by themselves when they are 7 or 8. And that is one of the best educations, I think, to help children get all this ideas of creativity and language. Number 5, people read aloud when they're learning to read, when they have to link the symbols to the spoken language. And we, as English teachers, dictate texts in class. Are there any other times when we need to read aloud? If there are, we can add more points. And this is how to do it well. There are 6 points that we can look at here. So first of all, as you're reading it, it's quite a difficult thing to do well, because as you're reading, you need to break the text down into meaningful chunks. If you just read word by word, it doesn't make sense and it makes it more difficult to understand. So those meaningful chunks, imagine I was going to read aloud this page. Reading aloud, how to do it well. Break the text down into meaningful chunks. So maybe 3 or 4 words. Your brain, number 2, needs to look ahead and predict what's coming next in order to get the correct sentence stress and intonation, because you don't know where to stress the word and how to use intonation unless you know what's coming next. You also need to work on the words and the sounds and the connected speech as you're reading so that you're pronouncing it well. That's also difficult. The stress, number 4, we stress the key words, the content words, the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives, and not the little grammar connective words. Number 5, we have to have some sort of variety of pace. If you read the same amount of language all the time at the same speed, everyone will go to sleep. And number 6, we need to add to the meaning and to the people understanding by reading it, not take away from the meaning. So that's how to do it. You can take a picture of this screen or go back to this later because you're going to have to do it. I want you to do this now for the rest of the class and for homework. I want you to read aloud and practice doing it really well. You can read those children's books that you made. You can read short texts from anything to dictate to each other. And in class this week and next, I'd like you to try to use dictation in class, but really read aloud in this way that we've looked at, trying to get the meaning across. You might need to prepare the text first. Find a short text, dictate it to the students. In pairs, they can then correct it, and then they, in turn, can tell you chunks of the text to write back onto the board for them to check. Very good practice of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay, that's the end of this lesson today. Have a nice week.